My name is Naomi Rhodes, and I am 42 years old. Most people in Greenwich, Connecticut, know me as the lucky heiress, born into one of the rare old money black families on the East Coast. I grew up surrounded by charity galas, silver-plated dinners, and the cold appraisals of high society. They never cared about my intelligence or my compassion. They looked at my body, at my face, and whispered behind champagne glasses, "Fat Naomi, lucky Naomi." Some of the crueler ones called me the fat heiress. I learned how to smile, as if I did not hear. I learned how to write million-dollar checks for charities just to see my name in the paper with the headline philanthropic socialite. I learned how to walk into a room with perfect posture, knowing that the gown I wore mattered more to them than the soul inside it. 10 years ago, I married Grant Whitmore. He was 7 years younger, handsome, charming, and endlessly ambitious. To the public, he was a rising political star, the fresh new face of his party. To me, he was a cold husband, a man who could live in the same 20-room mansion and still feel like a stranger. No children, no tenderness, no whispered confessions at night. Just staged handshakes in front of cameras and dry kisses on the cheek. That morning, the mansion was filled with the scent of jasmine and imported coffee. It was Grant's birthday. I had arranged a flawless brunch. The private chef had prepared his favorite dishes, white roses decorated the dining table, and 2 gifts waited for him. The first was a Rolex he had mentioned once at a political fundraiser. The second was a certificate for a $100,000 donation to the National Children's Foundation in his name. I knew he loved being called generous. For Grant, image was everything. Authentic. I walked down the grand staircase holding the donation certificate in its envelope. I wanted to surprise him, but the dining room was empty. I heard voices drifting from the parlor. Without meaning to, I paused outside the half-open door, and then I heard it. "That fat cow disgusts me." "Mom," Grant said, laughing, "I only care about her money. Did you think I actually enjoy sleeping with her?" The air left my lungs. My hands froze. Catherine Whitmore, my mother-in-law, answered, without hesitation, her tone flat and practical. "At least pretend, Grant. Pretend until you inherit everything. After that, you know what you have to do? You do not want to be tied to a body like that, stuffed full of regret." They both laughed, light and carefree, as if cruelty were nothing but small talk. The envelope slipped from my fingers onto the carpet. Silent, my legs trembled, but my face remained calm. It was the confirmation of everything I had quietly suspected for years. This marriage was not love, not even companionship. It was a cage, and I was the fat bird they were waiting to pluck. But I did not cry. I did not storm in and scream. I did not fling the Rolex into his smug face. Instead, I turned away, climbed the stairs step by step, and closed my bedroom door without a sound. I stared into the mirror. The woman looking back had warm brown eyes trained to conceal pain, a body that did not fit their narrow standards, and HL standards and HL sa, but also a body that had carried me through decades of whispers and humiliation. I whispered to myself, "They think they hold the power, but starting today, the game changes." Years ago, I had prepared for this moment. I had secretly established a family trust, codenamed Clause Aurora. Drafted with a lawyer I trusted more than anyone, it was designed as an escape hatch. At the push of a button, all my liquid assets would vanish from anyone's reach, including my husband's alter crace. The mansion, the stocks, the accounts, everything could shift out of their control in a matter of hours, and only I knew how to activate it. That evening, during dinner, I smiled as though I had not heard a word. I toasted Grant's birthday. I gave him the Rolex. He kissed my cheek, feigning gratitude. Catherine quipped that I should try a new diet. They laughed, and I laughed too. But inside, I was moving my pieces across the chessboard. At midnight, I walked barefoot through the silent house. I looked at the paintings I had chosen, the Italian furniture, the grand piano I never played. All of it stood like exhibits in a museum curated to prove I belonged, but I no longer wanted to belong. I opened my laptop, entered the code. Clause Aurora appeared on the screen. I clicked, confirm. In less than an hour, my assets flowed away like underground rivers. The mansion was sold through an escrow deal I had prearranged. My portfolio shifted into a Swiss account under a new identity. The machine of my life, so carefully built for appearances, collapsed quietly in the dark. At 5 a.m., I slipped on a long coat, hoisted a backpack, carried my passport, and tucked a faded photo of myself at 18 into my pocket. In that photo, I stood by the ocean with my arms open wide. Before I ever met Grant, before I ever became the elegant shadow of a fraudulent life, I opened the back door. No servant saw, no lights flickered. I left as quietly as a ghost. Upstairs, Grant still slept, dreaming of power. He did not know that the woman he had called a fat cow had just set fire to his entire future. I was not running away. I was beginning again. The wheels of the bus rattled against the pavement, and I sat by the window clutching my backpack. Dawn had barely broken, yet I felt more awake than I had in years. The faded photo of my 18-year-old self was tucked into the inside pocket of my coat, close to my heart. She was smiling at me, arms wide open by the sea. A girl who once believed the world belonged to her. For a moment, I almost believed I had become her again. The ride from Greenwich to New York, and then toward Chicago, was long and quiet. I kept my head down, my phone turned off, and my eyes steady on the passing scenery. Each mile that carried me farther from the mansion felt like a chain breaking. I had been invisible in that gilded house, trapped by Grant's ambition and Catherine's silent cruelty. Now, among strangers on this bus, I was invisible in a different way, and for the first time, it gave me relief. When the bus finally slowed and the driver called out the stop, the sign read, South Shore. It was not a glamorous neighborhood. The cracked sidewalks and peeling paint on the houses told their own stories. Winters had bitten hard here, and hope had been forced to grow like weeds through the concrete. I stepped off the bus and felt the chill cut through my coat. Around me, children chased each other barefoot in puddles. Women swept porches with one hand while balancing babies on their hips, and a man sold ribs from a smoking food truck. The smell of barbecue mixed with the faint sound of an old radio playing R&B. I breathed it in slowly. It was a world away from my sterile dining room of roses and Rolexes. Walking down the street, I noticed a sign taped to a gate. Room for rent. Shared bath. New questions asked. The words felt like an invitation written for me. I knocked. A woman in her 60s appeared. Her face was weathered, her eyes sharp with caution, looking for something. I saw the sign. I said softly, I need a place to stay. I can pay up front. She studied me carefully. My coat was too fine, my posture too straight. I could see the suspicion in her eyes. Name. I hesitated only for a heartbeat. Maya Solar. That is an unusual name, she muttered. Then she pulled the door open wider. Come in. The room is small. No refunds. And I do not tolerate trouble. You will not have any from me. He promised. The room was little more than a box. A narrow bed, a fan that groaned with every turn, a window with a broken pane, and walls stained with damp. It smelled of mildew and confinement. But to me it was a sanctuary. I paid for a month and placed my backpack on the bed. That night, I did not cry. I lay still, listening to the hum of the fan, and let the silence wrap itself around me like a blanket. The next morning, I wandered through the neighborhood. People glanced at me with curiosity, but no one asked questions. I invented a simple story. I had lost everything to a financial fraud. It was not a lie, though not for the reasons they imagined. They pitied me, but pity was easier to live with than contempt. It was on that walk that I found the community clinic. The building was crumbling, paint chipped, and the front desk was nothing but stacked boxes. Inside, a tired young man argued with a woman about medicine she could not afford. His sleeves were rolled up, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, but his voice was steady. I told you, ma'am, we do not have that antibiotic. If you buy it outside, I cannot guarantee it is real, but bring your son back anyway. We will not deny him care, even if you cannot pay. He turned, just briefly, and our eyes met. His gaze was sad, but warm. When the woman left, I stepped forward. Are you the doctor here? He nodded. Danielle Hayes. And you are... I caught myself before speaking my true name. Maya Solar. He studied me for a moment but did not press. Do you need medical attention? No. I came to ask if you need help. I know how to organize. I can handle inventory, donations, schedules. Maybe I could volunteer. His silence stretched long enough to make me uneasy. Finally, he extended his hand. We need more hands than questions here. Welcome. That day, I folded sheets, organized boxes of expired supplies, and carried crates that arrived like blessings from nowhere. No one asked me where I came from. No one expected me to smile for a camera. All that mattered was the work in front of us. When the evening came, I returned to my small room. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line over and over until the page was full. I never had time for the poor until I became one of them. Lying back on the hard mattress, I thought about the mansion. I thought about Grant, probably furious by now, and Catherine, already planning the next move. But their voices no longer filled my ears. What filled me was the faint laughter of children outside my window, the rhythm of life in a place where no one knew my name. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. I woke up to the sound of church bells echoing faintly from a block away. The fan in my small room clicked in its uneven rhythm, and sunlight cut through the broken window pane in a sharp diagonal line. For a moment, I forgot where I was, my body still expected to wake in a king-sized bed, surrounded by imported silk curtains. Then the smell of mildew and street dust reminded me that those days were gone. I walked back to the clinic that morning. The streets were already alive with people. Vendors shouted about fresh fruit. Children chased each other down the cracked sidewalks. A stray dog barked and wagged its tail. I realized that no one here cared who I had been. They only cared about who I was now. That thought both comforted and unsettled me. Inside the clinic, Daniel Hayes stood behind the reception desk, sorting through files stacked like unstable towers. He gave me a tired smile. "Good morning, Maya," he said. "Good morning, doctor," I replied. He pointed to a corner where a pile of sheets waited. "We are still behind on laundry. I think you can handle that." "I can handle anything that does not involve giving injections," I answered, and we both laughed softly. The hours passed with work. I wiped down metal tables, folded sheets, and tried to bring some order to the chaos. In the middle of the afternoon, a woman walked in, holding the hand of a little girl. The girl could not have been older than 8. Her hair was dull, her eyes dark and wide, and her small hand clutched a doll with one arm missing. She moved slowly, leaning against the woman's side. "This is Sophie," the woman explained. "She has not been eating for days. She runs a fever at night. I am worried." Daniel crouched down to look at the girl. His voice softened in a way I had not heard before. "Hi there, Sophie. Can you sit on this table for me?" She nodded silently and climbed up with effort. He listened to her chest, pressed gently on her stomach, and asked questions she answered with only small shakes of her head. When he finished, he looked at me. "Can you bring me the basic test forms?" I hurried to the back office, my hands trembling slightly. When I returned, Sophie was whispering something to her doll. Her lips moved slowly, as if she was telling the toy secrets no one else could hear. Daniel filled out the forms, then stepped aside with the older woman. His face was heavy. "I suspect leukemia. We need proper labs to be sure. But the tests cost money." I felt the air thicken in the room. I stared at Sophie. She smiled faintly at the doll, unaware of the weight of his words. My chest tightened with a mix of sorrow and anger. I had once signed away checks of $100,000 without blinking. Now here was a child's life hanging on the cost of a test. Later, while Daniel spoke with the woman about options, "Ik niet beslis Sophie. Your doll looks brave," I said gently. "She listens to me," Sophie whispered. "When I talk to her, she never looks away." I swallowed hard. That is important. Sometimes the world looks away when we need it most. Her eyes met mine with a strange seriousness for someone so young. "Have you felt invisible too?" I could not lie. "Yes. Many times." "Then we are the same," she said simply. "When people are scared, they do not look at you. And then you disappear." Her words pierced me. I had lived years behind marble walls pretending I did not see the misery around me. I wondered how many times I had been one of those people who looked away. Guilt pressed down on me. But Sophie's small hand on mine gave me a sense of grounding I had not expected. From that day, Sophie became the center of my time at the clinic. I helped her draw with colored chalk on scraps of cardboard. We made stories about her doll, turning it into a warrior who protected the weak. She began to smile more when I was near, though her body still showed signs of weakness. At night, I wrote in my notebook. The line I repeated over and over changed. I never had time for the poor until I became one of them, turned into love can grow even in broken places. Weeks passed, and I became more woven into the fabric of South Shore. The women greeted me on the street. The men nodded politely. People began to trust me, even if my name was not truly mine. But that trust also made my secret heavier. Each kindness I received reminded me that I was living behind a mask. One evening, as we were closing the clinic, Daniel stood beside me while I stacked boxes. "You are good at this," he said. "At folding cardboard?" I asked with a smile. "At being here," he answered. His eyes studied me with a quiet intensity. "You speak like someone who has lived a different life. Sometimes I wonder what you are not telling me." I froze for half a second, then forced my shoulders to relax. "We all have pasts we would rather not repeat," I said carefully. He nodded, though I could see doubt flicker in his eyes. He did not press further. That night, I returned to my room and stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror. My name here was Maya Solar, but Sophie had called me her friend. Daniel had accepted my help. Miss Ruth Carter, the landlady, had not thrown me out despite her suspicion. Piece by piece, this broken neighborhood was stitching me into its story. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered to myself, Naomi Rhodes may have died in that mansion, but maybe Maya Solar can learn how to live. Outside, the sounds of South Shore drifted into the night. Children still played in the street. Music hummed from a nearby porch, and the world carried on without knowing the woman inside this small room once wore gowns worth more than their houses. For the first time in years, I did not dream of escape. I dreamed of belonging. The first time Sophie laughed out loud in my presence, I felt something in me shift. She was sitting on the floor of the clinic with a piece of chalk, drawing crooked circles on cardboard scraps. I pretended to trip over her doll, and she burst out in a sound so pure that the whole room seemed brighter. It was the kind of laugh that made you forget for a moment how fragile she really was. Every day, I returned to the clinic, not only to work, but to see her. I told myself it was because the staff needed me, but deep down I knew Sophie had become my anchor. She looked at me with complete trust, and that trust terrified me as much as it healed me. Daniel noticed the bond forming. One afternoon, while Sophie colored in silence, he pulled me aside. His voice was low. "She trusts you," he said. "That is good for her, but it also means you cannot disappear on her. She has been abandoned enough already." His words struck me like a stone. I wanted to say I would never leave her, but a part of me knew the past was still chasing me. Grant and Catherine were not the kind of people to give up. If they found me here, everyone around me could get pulled into their storm. At night, in my small rented room, I stared at the notebook where I wrote my confessions. The words I repeated this week were different again. A secret grows heavier when people begin to love you. I wrote it until the ink dug deep into the paper. Sophie's health started to slip. She grew tired quickly, and sometimes fell asleep with her head resting on my lap while we worked on her drawings. One morning, she fainted while walking from the waiting area to the exam room. I caught her before she hit the floor, and her doll tumbled from her hand. Daniel rushed over, lifting her carefully onto a bed. His face was tight with frustration. The tests confirm what I feared. The leukemia is real, and it is progressing. She needs treatment we cannot provide here. The words hung heavy in the room. The older woman who cared for Sophie cried quietly in the corner. I held the girl's hand, trying to keep my own tears back. Later, when we were alone, Sophie looked at me with those wide, dark eyes. "Am I sick forever?" she asked. I forced a smile. "No, you are strong. Stronger than anyone I know. And strong people fight, even when it is hard." She studied me for a long moment, then whispered, "Promise me, you will not leave me." The words cut straight to my heart. "I promise?" I said. My voice shook, but I meant every syllable. The next day, Miss Ruth Carter, my landlady, found me sitting on the steps outside the building. She carried a loaf of bread in her hands and gave me the kind of look that stripped away any pretense. "You are not from here," she said plainly. "Your hands are too smooth. Your back is too straight. Life in South Shore bends people, but you walk like someone who has not carried our weight." I tried to reply, but she raised her hand. Do not be afraid. I had my secrets once too, but I will tell you something. When a woman hides herself, she must choose carefully whose eyes she lets see her. Some people only look for flesh. Others look for a soul. The doctor is the second kind. She walked away before I could answer. Her words lingered long after she disappeared down the street. That evening, Daniel caught me staring out the clinic window. The sky was red with sunset, and the streets buzzed with tired voices returning home. You look far away, he said. I was just thinking, I replied. About what? About how sometimes, when people see you clearly, it feels like both a blessing and a danger. He nodded slowly, then leaned against the window frame. You do not have to tell me everything, Maya. But know this, the more you stay silent, the more the silence starts to lie for you. I did not answer. My chest tightened, because he was right. Every day I lived as Maya Solar. Naomi Rhodes faded further into shadow. Yet each time Sophie smiled at me, I felt alive in a way Naomi had never been allowed to feel. That night, I dreamed of the mansion again. I dreamed of Grant's voice calling me names, of Catherine's cold laughter. But when I woke up, it was Sophie's voice I heard in memory. Promise me you will not leave me. I pressed the photograph of my 18-year-old self against my chest. That girl had dreamed of freedom. Now I had it, but it came wrapped in fear and responsibility. I whispered into the silence of my room. I will not leave her. Even if the truth catches up with me, I will not leave her. The fan clicked in its tired rhythm, and the city outside hummed with restless life. My secret weighed on me like a stone. But Sophie's small hand had already tied me to this place. I could not untie myself. Not anymore. The phone at the clinic rang one afternoon while I was sorting medical supplies. The sound was sharp, cutting through the usual hum of voices. Daniel answered with his usual calm tone, but his expression changed almost immediately. His shoulders stiffened, and his eyes narrowed as he listened. Yes, I remember that case, he said slowly. Are you certain the file still exists? And the name? You are sure? There was a long pause. His face drained of color. Finally, he ended the call with a clipped goodbye and set the receiver down as if it were heavy. When he turned, I was standing there with a box in my arms. You all right? I asked, forcing my voice steady. He nodded, though the movement was too quick, too practiced, just an old case. Something I thought was finished. He paused, then added, the name they mentioned was Whitmore. My grip on the box slipped, and it hit the floor with a dull thud. I knelt quickly to pick it up, hiding the way my hands shook. Sorry, I muttered. I just got dizzy for a second. Daniel studied me closely. I could feel his eyes pressing against the mask I wore, but he said nothing more. He walked out to the back patio, lit a cigarette, and leaned against the wall. I watched him from the doorway, my heart pounding. Whitmore. The name echoed in my head like a gunshot. That night, I could not sleep. I sat on my mattress with the notebook open on my lap. The words came out jagged, uneven. You can change your name, but you cannot bury the echo of the past. I wrote it again and again until the page was full. The next morning, Sophie greeted me at the clinic with a weak smile. Her doll was tucked under her arm, and her lips were pale. She reached for my hand. You came back, she whispered. I told you I would not leave. I said. My throat tightened as I spoke, because I knew she had no idea how fragile that promise really was. Later that day, I overheard Miss Ruth Carter speaking with one of the nurses in the hallway. Her voice was low, but it carried a sharp edge. That Maya woman. She is hiding something. You can see it in her eyes, but the girl trusts her. So, maybe that is enough. I stepped back before they saw me. Their words stung, but they were not wrong. Every day I lived under the name Maya Solar. My lie grew heavier. Yet every day Sophie's trust pulled me deeper into this life I wanted to believe in. In the evening, Daniel asked me to help him sort patient files. The small office smelled of dust and paper. I sat across from him, pretending to focus on the labels, but I could feel his gaze flickering toward me. Finally, he said, have you ever lived abroad? Your accent is too neutral. It does not belong to South Shore. I swallowed hard. I studied in Europe for a few years. Then I worked in D.C. That is probably why I sound odd. He nodded slowly, but I saw the doubt remain in his eyes. He was a man used to reading pain, to hearing the unspoken. He knew I was hiding more than I said. That night, I walked to the abandoned warehouse on the edge of the neighborhood. I had been cleaning it little by little, imagining what it could become. Shelter. A place for women who needed safety. A foundation that could grow from the ruins of my old life. I sat on a broken crate and opened my notebook. Fear is a cage with open doors. I wrote. Then I closed the notebook and pressed my palms to my face. Footsteps startled me. I looked up, and there was Ruth standing in the doorway with a bag of bread. She placed it on a box and stared at me with those sharp eyes. I looked for you at the clinic, she said. Sophie asked about you. I told her you would be back. Thank you, I whispered. Ruth stepped closer. You are not running from fraud. You are running from fear. And the only question left is, who do you fear most? Her words cut deeper than she realized. I wanted to answer, but the truth felt too heavy. My voice broke when I finally whispered, myself. She placed a hand on my shoulder gently, then left without saying another word. When I returned to my room that night, I lay awake listening to the distant noise of the city. For the first time, I admitted to myself that my disguise could not last forever. Grant would not stop searching. Catherine would not let her prize slip away without a fight. But as I remembered Sophie's small voice saying, promise me you will not leave, I knew I could not simply vanish again. I was tied to her now, tied to this place. The question was no longer if my past would find me. The question was whether, when it did, I would be strong enough to stand. The days in South Shore began to blur into a fragile rhythm. Mornings at the clinic, afternoons cleaning or folding sheets, evenings walking back through streets filled with barbecue smoke and children's laughter. It was a simple rhythm, but it gave me a kind of peace I had never known inside the marble walls of my old life. Yet underneath that peace, fear hummed, like a quiet wire. Every time I heard the buzz of an unfamiliar engine, or saw a stranger's face linger too long, my chest tightened. I knew Grant. I knew Catherine. They did not accept defeat. They would not let me vanish without a fight. One Saturday, the clinic held a small community fair to raise money for supplies. We set up food stalls, tables of handmade crafts, and a corner where Sophie and the other children sold bracelets made of colored threads. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled corn. For a moment, it felt like life itself was fighting to bloom despite the concrete and the scars. I threw myself into the work. I coordinated the stalls, balanced accounts, and encouraged the women to showcase their crafts proudly. You are building something, I told them. This is not small. This is power. They smiled at me as if they believed it. For the first time, Maya Solar was more than a mask. She was becoming someone real. At dusk, the fair was in full swing when I noticed Daniel speaking with a reporter from a local paper. The reporter snapped photos of the crowd, the stalls, and the laughter. My stomach dropped when I realized his camera had turned toward me. I looked away quickly, pulling my coat tighter, but it was too late. My image had been captured, blurred in the background, but unmistakably mine. That night, back in my room, I could not sleep. I kept seeing the flash of that camera. My notebook lay open, the words jagged on the page. You can hide in plain sight until the world decides to look your way. 2 days later, my fear proved true. Daniel found me folding sheets at the clinic. He held a newspaper folded under his arm. Without speaking, he laid it on the table. There, in a small corner of the community page, was a photo of the fair, children selling bracelets, women laughing, and behind them, me, half turned toward the camera. My blood ran cold. No one here would notice, Daniel said gently, but someone outside might. I forced my hands to stay steady. Then we need to hope no one outside is looking. But I knew better. Grant's world was built on appearances, and mine had once been the ornament he displayed. If he or Catherine saw that photo, they would follow it like hounds on a trail. Later that week, my nightmare stepped closer to reality. I was returning from the market with gauze and bandages when I saw it. A black SUV parked outside the clinic. Tinted windows, shiny and out of place on these dusty streets. I froze. My stomach clenched. I recognized that car as if it were a scar. I did not think. I turned on my heel and walked the other direction. Not running. Not yet. Just fast enough to be invisible among the crowd, I cut down an alley, then another, until I was 3 blocks away, hidden behind a crumbling wall. My chest heaved, but I kept silent. The SUV lingered for several minutes before pulling away. When it was gone, my knees buckled. I pressed my back against the wall and whispered to myself, "They are close." That night, I sat with Sophie at her bedside. She had grown weaker, her hair thinner, her smile fainter. She handed me a bracelet made of red threads. "It is so you will not leave," she whispered. "Now you are tied to me." I took her small hand, fighting the tears. "I am tied to you, Sophie, even without this bracelet." She looked at me closely. "Are you sad?" "A little," I admitted. "Why?" "You saved me." I kissed her forehead. "Because I do not know how to save myself." She smiled softly, as if she understood more than a child should. That smile broke me open. Later that evening, Daniel found me in the hallway. He leaned against the doorframe, his eyes shadowed. "Something is wrong," he said. I tried to look calm. "What do you mean?" "You were gone longer than usual today. You look shaken." And then there was that car. I met his eyes. He had noticed more than I wanted him to. My mask cracked just slightly. "You are hiding from something, Maya. Or someone," he said quietly. "And if you keep pretending, it will put more than you at risk. It will put Sophie at risk too." The weight of his words pressed down on me. He was right. My silence had protected me. But it was also beginning to endanger the people I loved most. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote a single sentence. "The lie is no longer mine alone. It is breathing in others. And it may kill what I love." I stared at those words until the ink blurred with my tears. For the first time since I fled, I wondered if I would have to stop running. Not because I wanted to, but because running might cost more than staying. The night after I saw the black SUV, I could not sleep. Every creak in the old building made me jump. I lay awake on the hard mattress, clutching Sophie's red thread bracelet in my hand. It was supposed to be a promise. Instead, it felt like a warning. At the clinic the next morning, Daniel watched me closely. He did not ask questions right away, but I could feel his gaze following me as I carried boxes and sorted files. Finally, when the waiting room had emptied, he set down his pen and spoke. "You were not just frightened by that car," he said. "You were terrified. Who are you really?" "Maya." I froze. The notebook in my hand slipped a little, and I quickly placed it on the table. "I already told you. I lost everything. I came here to start over." He leaned forward. "That is a story, not an answer. You speak like someone who was never poor. You carry yourself like someone who grew up in power. Even the way you sign your name. It looks like someone trained to write checks, not receipts." I forced a smile, but it did not reach my eyes. "Maybe I am just good at pretending." He shook his head. "No one pretends this well, unless they are hiding something bigger than shame." I turned away before he could see the truth in my eyes. But inside, his words echoed. The mask I had built was cracking, and I could not hold it together much longer. Later that day, Sophie collapsed again. She had been drawing with chalk in the courtyard when her body went limp. I caught her just before her head hit the pavement. Panic surged through me as I carried her inside. Daniel rushed to her side, his face pale. "The leukemia is advancing," he said. "We are out of time. She needs treatment in a real hospital." The older woman who cared for Sophie cried quietly in the corner. My own chest felt like it was splitting open. I could not lose this child. Not her. Not the only light I had left. That evening, he sat at Sophie's bedside. She was pale and sweating, her doll resting beside her. She reached for my hand with weak fingers. "You look scared," she whispered. I brushed her hair back gently. "I am scared for you." "You should not be," she said with a faint smile. "You promised you would not leave. That means I will not leave either. We are tied together now." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced them back. "Yes, we are tied together. Always." When she fell asleep, I slipped out of the room and found Daniel in the office. He was sitting in front of his laptop, the glow lighting his face. He did not notice me at first. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Then he stopped, staring at the screen. I stepped closer. "What are you looking at?" He closed the laptop too quickly, but I had seen enough. A photo, my face on the cover of a magazine, smiling beside Grant at a charity gala, my name printed in bold letters above the headline, Naomi Rhodes Whitmore. My knees weakened. My secret was no longer mine. Daniel stood, his expression heavy. So it is true. You are her. The missing wife. The woman who vanished with millions while the press screamed about scandal. My throat closed. I did not vanish with his money. I escaped with my own. Everything was mine. My family's Dodd. Not his. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head. You should have told me. Do you realize what danger you bring here? If he finds you, he will not care who gets caught in the crossfire. Not Sophie. Not anyone. My hands shook as I pressed them against the desk. I know, but I had nothing else. If I told the truth, no one would have let me stay. Not you. Not Ruth. Not this community. So I lied, because the only way I could breathe again was to become someone else. He looked at me with anger and something else. Hurt. And yet you found a way to give everything to Sophie. You gave her hope. You gave this place strength. But tell me, Naomi, when the past catches you, what happens to all of us who trusted Maya? His words cut deep. I wanted to answer, but there were no words strong enough. I only whispered, I do not know. That night, back in my room, I opened my notebook. My hands shook as I wrote, the ink smearing across the page. The truth is a mirror. Once it cracks, it cuts everyone who tries to hold it. I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. Outside, the neighborhood settled into sleep, but I knew mine was over. The mask of Maya Solar was breaking, and Naomi Rhodes was about to be exposed. The only question left was whether I would face it as a coward or as the woman Sophie already believed me to be. The next morning, the clinic felt different. It was not the peeling paint or the uneven hum of the old refrigerator in the back. It was the way Daniel's eyes followed me. He did not speak of what he had discovered the night before, but the silence between us was sharper than words. I tried to lose myself in work. I folded sheets, scrubbed tables, and greeted patients with the same calm tone I had practiced for months. Yet inside, my chest ached. My secret was no longer mine alone. Daniel knew, and his silence was a weight pressing against my ribs. At lunchtime, he finally spoke. We sat in the office surrounded by stacks of files. He closed a folder and looked at me directly. You cannot keep running, Naomi, he said. Not from him. Not from yourself. What you built here matters. But it is all balanced on a lie. If he finds you, he will destroy everything, including Sophie. Hearing my real name in his voice sent a shiver through me. It sounded foreign and familiar at once. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that Maya Solar was enough, that the truth no longer mattered. But Sophie's face kept rising in my mind, pale and fragile, asking me to promise I would not leave her. I left because I had to survive. I whispered, if I stayed, he would have crushed me until there was nothing left. I do not regret running. I regret that the lies followed me here. Daniel leaned forward. Then stop lying. Tell me everything. Trust me before your silence costs more than you can pay. I could not answer. I stood and walked out into the hallway. The walls felt narrower than ever, the air heavier. Later that day, Sophie grew worse. She coughed until her lips turned blue, and her tiny body trembled with exhaustion. Daniel rushed to stabilize her, his hands steady but his face carved with fear. We cannot delay anymore, he said after the crisis passed. She needs hospital care. If we wait, she will not make it. The older woman who cared for Sophie wept quietly. I sat beside the girl's bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. Her doll lay between us, its missing arm wrapped in a scrap of red fabric. Do not be afraid, she murmured. You saved me before. You will save me again. Her words cut me open. She believed in me more than I believed in myself. That evening, I went to the abandoned warehouse where I had been planning the foundation. The place was quiet, filled with dust and echoes. I spread out my notebook on a crate and flipped through the pages. Plans, sketches, dreams of a shelter where women could rebuild their lives. It all seemed fragile now, like paper waiting for fire. I wrote one sentence on a fresh page. If I do not face him, I will lose more than I ever ran from. The scrape of footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. Daniel entered, his hands in his pockets, his eyes searching. I knew I would find you here. he said softly. I closed the notebook. Why do you keep following me? Because you are not alone, he replied. Even if you want to be. For a moment, anger flared in me. You do not understand. If Grant finds me, it is not only me he will punish. He will use everyone around me. You, Ruth, Sophie. This entire neighborhood could become collateral. Daniel stepped closer. And if you keep silent, he will still find you. Only then you will face him without allies, without strength. You cannot fight a shadow by hiding from it. I wanted to argue, but the truth in his words pierced me. My silence had been a shield, but it was beginning to rot in my hands. That night, back in my room, I found an envelope slipped under my door. The handwriting on the front was neat, almost delicate. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a few words written in cursive. The truth cannot stay buried forever. There was no signature. My heart pounded as I read it again and again. Someone new. Someone beyond Daniel. The walls around me felt thinner, and the air colder. The next morning, as I walked to the clinic, I saw it again. The same black SUV parked near the corner, its engine idling, its windows dark. My stomach twisted. I turned into an alley before they could see me. For the rest of the day, I worked with a shadow pressing against my back. Every time the door opened, I expected Grant to walk in. Every time the phone rang, I feared it was his voice. Sophie held onto my hand tighter than usual. Her eyes searched mine as if she sensed the storm gathering. You will not leave me. Right, she whispered. I will not, I said, though fear coiled in my stomach like a serpent. That night, I opened my notebook again. My hand shook as I wrote the only words I could manage. Silence has protected me, but it may also destroy me. Tomorrow, I will decide which truth is worth dying for. The black SUV returned 3 nights in a row. It never stayed long, but each time it parked closer to the clinic. At first I told myself it was a coincidence, but deep down I knew better. Grant was closing in. My heart raced every time I saw those tinted windows. The thought of him stepping out of that car and finding me here made my hands shake. I tried to keep calm for Sophie's sake. She grew weaker by the day, and her smiles became rarer. I sat by her bed at night, telling her stories about brave girls who fought monsters in secret and always won. She clutched her doll and whispered back, "That is me. Right. I am the brave girl." "Yes," I said, "you are the bravest." Her faith in me was like sunlight cutting through storm clouds. But behind that warmth, fear gnawed at me. What if Grant found me before Sophie had a chance at treatment? What if everything I had built here turned to ash? One afternoon, Daniel called me into the office. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. He closed the door behind me. "I got another call," he said. "It was about the Whitmores. There are federal investigations now. Corruption, money laundering, judges taking bribes. Grant is at the center of it." The news stunned me, though I cannot say I was surprised. Grant's hunger for power had no limits. Daniel leaned forward. "If the prosecutors are involved, this will not stay quiet. Reporters will come. They will dig. And when they dig, your name will surface again." I gripped the edge of the desk. Then maybe it is time my name surfaced on my own terms. He studied me, his face unreadable. "If you are serious, Naomi, you cannot do it halfway. You either tell the truth completely, or you stay silent forever. There is no middle ground left." His words followed me out of the office, heavy as chains. That evening, Ruth Carter found me sitting on the clinic steps. She carried a small tin of cornbread and placed it beside me. "You have been looking over your shoulder too much," she said. "The past does not leave easy." I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She sighed. "I knew from the start you were not just some woman ruined by money. You carried yourself like a queen in hiding. I did not need the details. I only needed to know if you would use that strength for good. And you have. That girl loves you. This neighborhood needs you. But secrets rot faster than wounds. And yours is spreading." Her words stung because they were true. I thanked her quietly, and she left me alone with the fading light. Later that night, while I was writing in my notebook, a knock came at my door. When I opened it, no one stood there. Only an envelope lay on the ground. Inside was a single page. "Your life is not only yours anymore. He is here. No name, No explanation. Just those words. My chest tightened as if invisible hands were pressing against me. The next morning, Daniel told me something that changed everything. Evelyn Whitmore contacted me. He said, I nearly dropped the cup in my hands. She. What? She wants to meet. She claims she has information about Grant. And about you? The name Evelyn tasted bitter on my tongue. She had been my tormentor as much as Grant. Cold, cruel, always reminding me I was never enough. What could she possibly want now? Daniel looked at me carefully. She said she cannot live with her silence anymore. I do not know if I trust her, but if what she says is true, it could change everything. I turned away, my heart racing. Evelyn was a woman built on secrets. If she was ready to confess, it meant the ground under Grant's feet was shaking harder than I thought. That night I sat by Sophie's bed again. She was restless, her small body sweating with fever. She whispered in her sleep, "Do not leave me, Naomi." I brushed her hair back and whispered back, "I will not leave you. Not now. Not ever." But even as I said it, I felt the weight of the storm pressing closer. Grant's shadow loomed over South Shore. Evelyn's truth dangled in the air like a blade, and my lies had run out of places to hide. I opened my notebook one more time before dawn. My hand shook as I wrote, "The net is closing. When it does, I must choose. Either I break free by telling the truth, or I am caught forever." Daniel insisted on coming with me. When Evelyn Whitmore asked to meet, my instinct was to refuse. But part of me knew that if I kept running from every shadow, I would never stop. So we arranged to meet her at a quiet hotel far from South Shore. The drive there felt endless. Every passing car made me tense, expecting Grant to appear. When we entered the dimly lit lounge, Evelyn was already waiting. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, and her once perfect posture was bent under the weight of years she had pretended not to carry. For the first time since I had known her, she looked human. "Naomi," she said softly, "or should I call you Maya now?" I sat across from her, my hands folded tight in my lap. "Why did you ask for this meeting?" Her eyes flickered toward Daniel, then back to me. "Because silence has finally turned into poison. I cannot keep it anymore. You need to know the truth. Not for me, for yourself, for that child you care for what is coming." I wanted to laugh at the sudden tenderness in her tone, but her face was too grave. "Speak." "Then," I said, "tell me what truth you buried while you watched me suffer under your son's cruelty." She flinched, but pressed on. "Grant is not my son. At least, not in the way the world believes." The air seemed to thicken between us. I stared at her, my heart pounding. "What are you saying?" She clasped her trembling hands. "When I was 18, I was assaulted. I never told anyone. Not my husband, not my family. I carried the shame in silence. And when Grant was born, I pretended he was legitimate. My husband accepted him without question. But in my heart, I always knew he was the son of violence. And as he grew, I began to see the same hunger, and the same cruelty in his eyes. I felt the blood drain from my face. My body leaned back against the chair as if to escape her words. "You raised him. You encouraged him. You stood by him while he mocked me, while he used me, while he tore pieces out of me." Tears welled in her eyes. But she did not look away. "Yes." I stayed silent. I played the part of the proud mother. I thought if I ignored the truth, I could rewrite it. But lies do not fade. They grow. And now he has become the man I feared he would. Daniel said regelbeside, his jaw tight. "Why now? Why tell us this after all these years?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "Because his hunger is devouring him. The prosecutors are circling. His allies are abandoning him. And when he falls, he will try to drag everyone with him, including you. Naomi, he will not stop until he destroys you. Because you were the one who slipped from his grasp. You wounded his pride more than any scandal." I shook my head, struggling to process the storm. In her words, "Why would I believe you? You let me rot in silence. You watched me fade and did nothing." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a sealed envelope. She slid it across the table. I kept everything, proof of his origin, proof of what I buried. If I disappear, this will keep him from rewriting history. And maybe, in your hands, it will help you fight him. My fingers hovered over the box but did not touch it. The weight of it seemed unbearable. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice trembling. You do not have to forgive me. I do not forgive myself. But I need you to know that he was never just your cruel husband. He was born from violence, raised in silence, and shaped by power. And if you underestimate him, he will consume you, and anyone near you. Silence stretched across the table. My heart pounded against my ribs. For years I had believed my suffering was the result of one man's greed and one woman's cruelty. Now I saw that the roots went deeper, tangled in shame and lies that began long before I entered their lives. Finally, I spoke. I do not know if I can ever forgive you, but I will take this truth, and I will use it, because I will not let him destroy me. Not anymore. Evelyn lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then at least my silence will not have been for nothing. We left the hotel with the box tucked under Daniel's arm. The night air was cold, but I felt hotter than fire. Every step toward the car felt heavier. Daniel glanced at me but said nothing. When we finally returned to South Shore, I sat in my small room and opened the notebook once more. My hand moved quickly across the page. The truth has teeth. It cuts. It bites. But it also frees. Tonight I saw that silence is another kind of prison, and I am done serving sentences for other people's crimes. As I set the pen down, I heard Sophie's faint laughter drift up from the clinic below. Even in her weakness, she found ways to smile. That sound anchored me. For the first time, I knew that when Grant came, I would not run again. I spent the night after meeting Evelyn sitting by Sophie's bedside. Her breath came in shallow waves. Her skin pale against the pillow. The red thread bracelet she had given me dangled loosely from her wrist. I held her hand and whispered promises I was not sure I could keep. You will get better, I said softly. I will find a way. Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a faint smile. As long as you stay, I am not going anywhere, I replied, though fear twisted in my stomach. By morning, Daniel insisted that we begin the process of moving her to a proper hospital. If we wait any longer, she will not make it, he said firmly. The foundation you dream about is noble. But this child cannot wait for dreams. She needs real treatment now. I nodded, though my chest tightened. Money was the wall between Sophie and the care she needed. I had burned almost every bridge, but there was still one jewel left, hidden at the bottom of my backpack. My grandmother's sapphire ring. I had kept it as a final anchor to my past, but Sophie's life was worth more than any inheritance. That afternoon, I walked into the city and sold it to a discreet buyer. The check in my hands felt heavy, not for what it was worth, but for what it meant. It was the last piece of Naomi Rhodes, the heiress, dissolved into paper. I returned to the clinic and placed it on Daniel's desk. Get her admitted, I said. No excuses. He looked at me with quiet respect. You never stop surprising me. That evening, as we were preparing the paperwork, I noticed people outside gathering in hushed clusters. A car had pulled up at the edge of the street. Not just any car, a black SUV with tinted windows. My blood ran cold. Grant had arrived. The crowd watched warily as he stepped out. He looked older, his face harder, but his posture was still that of a man who believed the world owed him reverence. He scanned the street like a predator, searching for prey. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stand tall. He entered the clinic without hesitation, his expensive shoes clicking against the worn floor. The room fell silent. Patients, nurses, and volunteers stared. Daniel moved instinctively to stand between us. Naomi, Grant said, his voice smooth, dripping with false charm. Or should I say Maya? Did you really think you could disappear forever? The sound of my old name in his mouth felt like a knife. I steadied my breath. You should not be here. He smirked. This neighborhood is a far cry from Greenwich. You traded marble floors for mildew. Do you really believe you belong here? I belong where I choose to belong, I answered firmly. His eyes darkened. You embarrassed me. You stole what was mine. And now the press is circling like vultures. Do you know what that means? I need you back by my side to clean up the mess. I almost laughed, but my voice came out as steel. I am not your ornament anymore. Everything I took was mine. Every dollar, every house, every share, and I will never stand by your side again. The room held its breath. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. ready if Grant moved closer. Grant's smile slipped. Do not test me. I can still ruin you. I can still bury this place. You think this clinic will survive my reach? You are naive. I stepped forward, feeling Sophie's bracelet press against my wrist. You already ruined yourself. The prosecutors are after you. Your allies are abandoning you. And the truth about your mother is waiting to surface like Enna's. For the first time, his face faltered. A flicker of fear crossed his eyes before he masked it with anger. Evelyn told you. She did, I said. And if you keep pushing, the world will know what she buried. You are not just corrupt. You are a fraud from the very beginning. He lunged forward, but Daniel caught his arm. The crowd outside the clinic had begun to gather at the doorway, watching. Their presence seemed to weaken him. For the first time, Grant looked small, cornered not by me alone, but by eyes that refused to look away. He pulled free and glared at me. This is not over, he hissed. Then he stormed out, his car engine roaring as he sped away. The room exhaled at once. Daniel turned to me. You just declared war. I nodded, my knees trembling, but my voice steady. It was already war. Now it is open. That night, I returned to my room and opened my notebook. My hand moved across the page as if the words had been waiting for years. The storm has arrived. I am no longer running. If I fall, I will fall standing. And I will not fall alone. As I closed the book, I heard Sophie's faint cough through the walls. Her battle was not over, and neither was mine. But for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The morning after Grant's arrival, the whole neighborhood buzzed with rumors. People whispered about the black SUV that had thundered through our broken streets. Some said he was a politician. Others said he was a criminal. A few already suspected the truth, that the man who had haunted my life was finally close enough to breathe the same air again. I woke with the heaviness of it pressing against my chest. Sophie was still in the hospital bed, hisking pale, her tiny hands clutching the red bracelet she had made for me. Each time I looked at her, the choice became clearer. I could not disappear again. Not when her life, Daniel's work, and the foundation we were building depended on my courage. Daniel found me in the hallway, staring at the cracked ceiling. He will be back, he said quietly. I know, I answered. You cannot keep hiding. Naomi, he will drag you into the light, whether you are ready or not. I took a deep breath. Then, I will step into the light on my own terms. That afternoon, I wrote a letter, not to Grant, but to the press. I told them the truth. My name, my marriage, the betrayal, the money I had moved to protect myself, and the foundation I was building in South Shore. I did not write it to shame him. I wrote it because silence had been my prison for too long. I was done being invisible. When Daniel read the draft, his eyes widened. If you release this, you will destroy his career completely, but you will also put a target on your back. I have lived with a target for years. I replied, at least this time, it will mean something. 2 days later, the article hit national headlines. The photos showed me standing in the clinic, wearing simple clothes, surrounded by patients. The headline read, The Heiress Who Walked Away. Naomi Rhodes breaks her silence. Grant's face appeared on every channel within hours. Commentators argued. Reporters shouted. His allies stumbled. Accusations piled higher than any defense he could mount. For once, the story was not about him. It was about me, and about women who had been silenced and discarded. The backlash was immediate. Threats flooded the clinic phone line. Anonymous letters arrived at the foundation site, but so did something else. Donations. Letters of support. Volunteers from other neighborhoods asking how they could help. The storm had broken, but it carried seeds of something new. That evening, Daniel and I sat by Sophie's bed. She was weak, but awake, her eyes flickering between us. Why is everyone talking about you on TV? She whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. Because I told the truth. Did it hurt? Yes, I said softly. But sometimes telling the truth is the only way to stop the pain. She nodded as if she understood more than any child should. Then she pulled at the bracelet on her wrist and said, As long as you stay, I am not afraid. Her words pierced me deeper than any headline. 3 days later, Grant returned. He did not storm in with arrogance this time. He came alone, without cameras, without his polished mask. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. I was in the foundation warehouse, overseeing the final touches before we opened the doors. He stood in the doorway, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then he said, "You ruined me." "No," I replied calmly. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He stepped closer, his voice hoarse. "I could still fight. I could drag you through the courts. I could." His words trailed off. He looked down at the dusty floor. "But I am tired. Naomi, more tired than I have ever been." I studied him, this man who had once controlled every corner of my life. I saw no power left in him, only the hollow echo of what he thought power was. "Then stop fighting ghosts," I said, "because you already lost." He searched my face for something. Perhaps anger, perhaps pity, but all I had left for him was truth. "We are nothing now, Grant. Not enemy, not partners, not even shadows. You have to live with yourself. That will be punishment enough." He left without another word. I never saw him again. The night of the foundation's opening, the whole neighborhood gathered. Children painted murals on the walls. Women served food. They had cooked together. Men strung lights across the courtyard. It was not grand, but it was alive. I stood at the entrance. Sophie beside me in a wheelchair, her red bracelet still tied to her wrist. Daniel stood on my other side, his hand warm against mine. When the ribbon was cut, I felt something inside me loosen. Not triumph, not victory. Something deeper, a release. For the first time since I was 18 years old, I was not performing. I was living. Later that night, when the crowd had gone and only the hum of the city remained, I walked alone through the empty halls. The foundation smelled of fresh paint and hope. My steps echoed against the tile. I whispered into the quiet, "I am not invisible anymore." And for the first time, I believed it. It has been 1 year since Naomi Rhodes left this world. But in South Shore, her presence is everywhere. The Maya Solar Foundation has become more than a building. It is a heartbeat. Every morning the doors open to women who once believed they had no choices. And every evening they leave with something stronger than survival. Hope. Sophie is still with us. Her treatments have been long, painful, and uncertain. Yet she fights with a bravery far beyond her years. The doctors say the road ahead is not easy, but each day she wakes with a smile is a victory we celebrate. She wears the red bracelet Naomi gave her like armor. Sometimes, when the pain is sharp, she whispers, "Naomi told me not to be afraid." And somehow, the fear fades. As for me, I carry Naomi's words in every step I take. She left behind more than memories. She left a roadmap. Every file in her notebook, every phrase she wrote, every plan she sketched late at night has become our guide. I run the foundation not as a director but as a caretaker of her vision. Each time I look into the eyes of a woman who finds refuge here, I know Naomi is still alive in ways no illness, no betrayal, no death could erase. Her story did not end with her last breath. It multiplied. The book she wrote, found in her drawer, has spread across the country. Women read it in silence, underline its lines, and pass it to their daughters. Professors teach it in classrooms. Activists quote it in rallies. And here, in this modest corner of Chicago, our legacy feeds hundreds, shelters dozen, and heals more souls than I can count. Sometimes I still feel the weight of losing her. At night, when the clinic falls silent, I sit under the almond tree we planted with her ashes. Its roots dig deeper every season, its leaves spreading wider. It is Naomi's way of reminding us that life grows even after endings. I close my eyes, breathe, and I hear her voice again. I am not invisible anymore. That is the truth we guard. That is the truth we share. Naomi's journey is one of her true stories that deserves to be remembered. Every chapter of her life reminds us that strength is born in silence and revealed in truth. If you believe in honoring her true stories and carrying them forward, join this community by subscribing. Each time we share her true stories, we give voice to women who have been silenced. Each time we watch and listen, we keep her legacy alive. And together, by standing with her true stories, we build a foundation not only of hope, but of justice. So, if Naomi's fight and her legacy touched your heart, subscribe now. Let the world know you stand with her true stories.